Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Hammer Podcast. Today is October 18th, 2020, and I'm speaking with Preston HALFORD. Am I correct on that? Preston HALFORD.
Yes, sir.
All right. He went to the Aspen Achievement Academy in 1997 and to the Agape Boys Ranch from 1997 to 2000. So,
Yes.
Preston, the floor is yours, my friend. Go right ahead.
All right. So, just wanted to start and say much love and respect to the other guys that are on here and everybody that's coming out and talking about this. It's been crazy, especially because, it was 17 years before I talked to anybody who had ever been to or heard about Agape. So I really just, for that long, thought that I was never going to, talk to anybody from there. But yeah, this is really cool, and I'm glad everybody's doing it, and I appreciate the opportunity to get out here and share my story. So, two questions I was asking myself before I did this is, where do I start and where do I stop? Because you can go all the way back till today. But I think we'll just start with, me going to the place in Utah, Aspen Achievement Academy.
Okay.
So I'd been in some trouble. Pretty serious trouble, to the point where, I definitely was looking at jail time if I'd been caught doing this stuff. Some of the stuff I did get caught. So it was kind of a way out for me to go to this camp in Utah. And the way it was explained to me was it was going to be like a summer camp, maybe even like riding horses and cabins and stuff like that. So I thought, hey, that's pretty cool. I don't have to face any charges or anything. I can go out there and kind of maybe even get myself back together a little bit. So I went out there, flew out to Utah, and then to this little town called Loa. And then I thought, everything was cool pretty much up until the point they took me in this little room and they had me stripped down naked and then bend over, spread my cheeks, and cough. And so at 15 and thinking I'm at summer camp, right then I was like, okay.
Yeah.
This ain't nothing like I've ever done before.
This is not going to end well.
Yeah, nothing good ever starts like that, right?
Right.
So yeah, and I laugh and joke about a lot of this. I know a lot of this stuff is really hard and traumatic for a lot of people. I think a good way over the years, and definitely while I was there too, is obviously to laugh about this stuff as much as you can. So when I'm talking about it, if I'm laughing at this stuff, it's mostly just because it's so crazy,
Right. It's good. It's good therapy to laugh. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that was always my thing. For me, I was the type of person, or type of kid, I'd been through a lot before I ever went to these schools. So I already kind of had to have those coping mechanisms by the time I got there. So, and there's a lot of other guys that weren't like that, obviously. And we talk about that more later, but I think some other guys touched on it, how, some guys at places like Agape, they really don't belong there. And what I mean by that, not that any of us did, but it's just that they probably could have gone to an easier boarding school, less strict. Whereas people like me in my situation, I would have got kicked out of anywhere. So, it's a little different. Again, not sure how that really matters with what we're talking about, because at the end of the day, all I want to do is just state the facts of what happened, and then people can put their own opinion on it. But so anyways, I'm out there, and next thing I know, these guys take all my clothes, and I'm like, I need those clothes. They're like, no, we'll give you everything you need. So they give me a pack with some supplies, some goofy looking clothes, and I'm just like, oh, okay, this is just, way different than anything I've ever experienced, right?
Uh-huh.
So then they put in a Bronco, and I think it was 6 o'clock at night, and they drive me 8 hours into the mountains out in Loa, Utah. And by the end of that trip, I couldn't believe it, because I couldn't believe I've been sitting there in this Bronco for 8 hours and that's how far out we were. It's like I had so many thoughts about running away and getting out of there, and about every hour I'd start thinking, wait, there's nowhere to go. So anyways, I get there to the camp, and all the students are on this thing called solo, which is where you have to go sit on your own campsite, like just completely alone. It can be one night, it can be 5 nights, they don't tell you. It's like some old Native American ritual thing to find yourself. If you ask me, it's like solitary confinement. People go crazy. It's like torture.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where all the students were when I first got there. So the next morning they come out, and the elevation just had me sick. I remember just feeling sick, and then going around to these sites and getting all these kids. And the thing that just shocked me was how dirty they were. I could tell it was just caked on mud and grease all over these kids. And it was just kind of shocking to see that. I'd never seen kids, even like homeless kids in Europe, I hadn't seen be that dirty. You know what I mean? Like the gypsies and stuff. But, so then I was in there watching all this go down. I'm just like, this is really freaking weird. Next thing I know, I've got to pack all my stuff up in my pack and then tie it to my back. So it's like a 60-pound pack, and I'm like, oh my God. And you just have like little seatbelts to tie it up with.
Yeah.
So I'm hiking. Next thing I know, this kid starts running and screaming, and he runs off into the woods. And I'm like, what's going on with that kid? And they're like, oh, he has giardia because he didn't put iodine in his water. So giardia is like explosive diarrhea that you get from drinking. Yeah, if you're out in the woods or something like that, you don't purify the water. So it can be really bad. But they just had this kid running around just like explosive diarrhea all in the woods and dirty as hell. And I'm just like, what in the hell is this place, So we start hiking, and I mean, I couldn't talk to anybody yet. You're on mouse status. When you first get there, you can't talk to anybody for a few days. And we just hike all day, and I just remember thinking, like, this is torture for sure. 60-pound pack falling off my back. I'm like a 15-year-old kid, and we're just hiking nonstop. So then, from there, I think the next day I decided I was going to run. So I was like, forget this, because you got to poop in a hole in the ground. You got to rub sticks together to cook your food. You're sleeping outside. And I was just like, I'm not doing this, right? So I had the camp counselor's name. This guy's name was Brad. And he came up and he's like, so how do you like the program? And I'm like, I hate it. I'm getting out of here. I'm running away. And I thought I was going to be all tough and stuff. And he's like, well, you can do that, but we'll catch you. And I said, well, the first one of y'all that comes near me, I'm busting your head with the biggest rock I can find. Thinking he would be like scared or something like that. And he just goes, well, you can do that, but then you'll go to lockdown. And I was like, well, okay, what's lockdown? And then he explained it to me, and I was like, okay, I'll be good. So, yeah, I mean, from what, and, he wasn't mad or anything. He was just matter of fact, like, dude, if you don't, finish here,
yeah,
you're going to go to this place, which was Provo Canyon, which is what Paris Hilton's, where she went and what her documentaries and stuff is about. So he described that to me, and I don't remember exactly what he said. I just remember being like, hell no, I'll do this for 9 weeks, So then we're hiking around every day. And, the hardest part was really just the hiking, because it's just like it was 10 miles a day. I think we hiked 800 miles in 9 weeks. You're sore. Yeah, it was crazy. It's constant hiking from the time the sun comes up, a little bit before the sun comes up. And it'd be so cold because we're in the mountains that you wake up and your water bottle would be frozen. You'd have ice all over your sleeping bag. And then you'd take your little bag of oats, which was what you had for breakfast, and it would have like frozen flies in it that would, when they defrosted, they'd fly away, but... So you pour the cold oats in some ice water, then you'd put like some nasty powdered milk. I mean, that would be your breakfast, and you scarfing that down, freezing cold, and then you're just hiking. So, and with that, that was the hardest part. So the staff members there were all like hippies. We used to call them adventure junkies. And we just could not figure out, like, hey, we're here for punishment. Like, you're here, like on your own decision. We just thought that was nuts. But, after being at Agape and looking at the way they were, like, the way they were there, if you got into an argument, you were going to get in a fight with another kid, they would stop and everybody would have to sit down in a circle so you're close to the earth, and you'd have I feel statements. So everybody goes around and talks about how they feel. So people wouldn't want to do that because then it's like, we're not going to get to camp till later. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that kind of kept us from fighting, but it was, at the end of the day, it worked out for me in the way that, like, by the end, okay, so in order to get there, my mom's psychiatrist had declared me like criminally insane. So my dad's insurance wrote a prescription for me to go to this place. So while I'm there, I intercepted a letter accidentally from my mom to the camp counselor saying that he wanted me to go to emotional growth school afterwards, which if you watched the Paris documentary, she talks about that. I think she went to a couple. But they're a lot less strict. They're not like a lockdown. It'd be like an extension of where I was, but just like in a regular boarding school.
Right.
And I got pissed because they swore up and down if I went here, it'd only be 9 weeks that I would come right home. So now I got this letter, and they're talking about where's he going to go? He can't come home. And I was barely a freshman. So I'm looking at like 4 years in some goofy place because I knew all about the emotional growth schools. And you like had to wear mandatory Wranglers and just goofiness like that, So I just like quit hiking. I was like, screw this. I'm not going to do any of this. And it really didn't get me anywhere. And they really didn't, like, they care, but the way they approach it is just so different. They just sit there and like kind of annoy you into hiking, kind of like, come on, you got to do it. So finally I'm like, all right. So I like accepted my fate, and I was like, I'm just going to make the best of it while I'm here. So I worked hard to like move up in the program. And what happened was after I'd been there a month and a half, they came in the middle of the nowhere in the morning time. We're like, hey, Preston, you need to go in town. And I'm like, oh my God, town? Like, I hadn't seen a building for a month and a half. None of us had seen a toilet for a month and a half. So like to get to go in a car ride into town is like better than Disneyland, So yeah. I'm trying to figure out for what, why am I going to go 8 hours all the way into town? So I go and they're like, you're going to get a psych eval. And that's when I'm like, oh yeah, because the only reason my insurance is paying for this because I'm criminally insane, right? So I go into this office and I go in there and I'm like covered in grease. I haven't bathed in a month and a half. I've got a big knife on me and I'm just gnarly looking. I had to smell like a Sasquatch. And I'm sitting in this like nice little office with, this a couple girls that were all dressed up real nice, and I remember them just looking at me like, what? Yeah. And so I go in there and this guy's like, so how do you like the program? And I don't know why I said this, because at that time I wasn't quite to the point where I had accepted my fate, but I was just like, oh, I love it. It's awesome. I'm going to go home and do all this good stuff, and I'm going to get a job and support my family and all this and that. And so he just wrote cured, you know what I mean? And so then I found out, like, I wasn't going to go anywhere. I was going to go home after that. So I was like, yeah, because my mom, being divorced at the time, couldn't afford to send me anywhere on her own. So, yeah, but a couple of crazy things that happened there. I mean, definitely, if it was going to be abuse, I would say the solos, because that's mental torture, and when I first got there, I was just dreaming about solo because I hated hiking. I mean, it's just 1 foot in front of the other, up and down mountains all day, nasty food, bug bites, so many bug bites, and that elevation, it could rain like 30 times a day, and it can get freezing cold, hot. So anyways, I get on solo, and maybe after about 4 hours, I was like going a little crazy. What they do is they take you out, they give you like, some kind of thought to think about and contemplate. I'm pretty sure it's from some Native American stuff, rituals back in the day, but they put a bandana over your eyes, they spin you in a circle, and then they walk you out to a campsite. They sit you down and they're like, you cannot leave this campsite. It's a 50-foot radius. If you leave, we're going to tear up your growth book, which is like you go from mouse to coyote to buffalo, and each one you get more privileges. And then like eagles at the top. They tear it up, you lose, you know, you go down in rank, you lose your knife, you can lose all kinds of privileges. So you don't want to get caught leaving your site. So they leave you there, and all you have is a pen and paper, really. And you don't know how long you're going to be there. It could be one night, it could be 5 nights, that's the worst torture. You know, not mention the fact you're in the middle of the freaking woods. Like, there's hunters out there, there's bears, you got to hang your meat in the tree. You're like 15, you know, some kids 14, 13. So it's definitely weird, and everybody goes pretty crazy during those things.
Yeah.
You know, like you lose your mind, and they thought that was good. You know what I mean? And they're like, oh, you had some kind of epiphany or something like that. But in reality, you just go psycho, to the point where probably my 3rd solo, I said, screw it, I'm not staying here, I don't care. And I started just leaving my site. Remember, it was super hot, the flies would land on you, and that's what makes you really insane. You know, you can't get them off you faster than they land on you. But if you ever watch Naked and Afraid, that's what makes them tap, is the bugs, you know. But, so I'm like, screw it, I'm leaving my site. As soon as I leave, I hear somebody coming on my side, and I'm like, oh my God, of course I'm busted, you know, right the second I leave. But I look up, and it's my best friend. His name was Chris, and he's like, tears just flooding down his face, but he's laughing hysterically like the Joker, and he's like, I went insane, and I was like, yeah, me too. I was like, screw this, and we just left and went to my other friend's site and like never got caught, and every time we did solo, we did that, so that we didn't end up like totally losing it. But probably that, and definitely the hiking. Here's another, the worst thing, bro, I didn't bathe for 9 weeks. So we never bathed. I jumped in like a freezing cold lake that put me into shock like one time. But we found out they were supposed to be giving us billy baths, which is you heat up like an old coffee can, which is what we cooked everything in. And you heat that water up, and then you just pour that on yourself. And then we never did that. So by the time my mom picked me up, she didn't recognize me. She said she thought I was a black kid. I had so much dirt. I thought I was tan. I was like, I'm going to go home and get some girls. I'm all tan. And then like 6 showers later, I'm like white, you know. But the craziest thing that happened there was definitely we moved from the mountains to the desert, which was really cool because the mountains, I hated the mountains. You have to hike every day, up and down. It's freezing cold. It's snowing, bugs, bears, all that stuff. But the desert is, you can only hike every 3 days because there's not much water.
Right.
And there's no bugs. And it's, you know, kind of warm during the day. You don't even have to build a tent because it doesn't rain. So I was only there for a week. But when we got there, like literally the first night we got there, we camped on top of this huge canyon, and me and this other kid had to go down to the canyon to get water. So we went down to this like coyote den, and we're coming back up, and I remember asking him, I said, hey man, do you think you'd die if you fell off this cliff? And then before he answered, I said, yeah, of course you die. Like, why am I asking that, you know? Mm-hmm. But the next day we're sitting there, and everybody's throwing stuff off this cliff. You know, I mean, we're a bunch of kids, and we're way too comfortable around all this stuff. And I'm actually writing a letter to my mom, maybe like 15 feet away, and I hear something big fall down the cliff, like, ba-boom, ba-boom. And I'm like, man, they throw a whole tree off the side? But all of a sudden, everybody was quiet. You know, before everybody was hooping and hollering, you know, woo! And then everybody was dead silent. And then I heard this kid, Ben, he said, oh my God. And like, I knew right then, like, somebody had fallen off.
Oh,
and they started screaming, staff, staff. And I came over, and I'm like, oh my God. And they're like, this kid Lyndon fell off. And, you know, we're just like, oh my God, nobody can believe it. Of course, you can't see him because it's a gigantic canyon. And we're yelling for him. We don't hear him. You know, there's no way you would think that you'd survive. And then all of a sudden we start hearing screaming, like sounding like a little girl, like, ah! just
Yeah.
echoing the canyon. And we're like, oh my God, he's alive. You know what I mean? Like, that's a
Right.
good thing. And so one of the staff members ran down there, was able to get down there and then walkie-talkie up and said he had a broken leg and an air pocket in his lung.
Ooh.
So we're just all like, oh my God, you know what I mean? It's one of those times where you think they're going to have to close the school down after this or something, That was when I was super naive. But, yeah, it was way before Agape, yeah. And so the nearest helicopter was 3 hours away. It took that long for them to get out, and then they had to care flight him. They couldn't land. They had to hook him up to a rope. And I remember going down in the canyon and taking like a vertical photo because we had all these cameras. I got a bunch of pictures from there. I don't have this picture though, but just to see like the top of the canyon down to where he was, I mean, it was definitely 100 feet, and it's just unbelievable that anybody could survive. I think he just hit so much stuff on the way down. But they took him out of there, and then I graduated, and then come to find out, my mom called up to ask how he was and said that he'd only had like cuts and bruises, and that
Really?
yeah, and then he had to go finish the program, which I thought was the craziest thing ever. Because to this day, I can't be near any edges or cliffs or any people around him. But yeah, I mean, so that was my experience there. Definitely weird. I want to say it was not 100. It was 100% not beneficial because I definitely shined there. I became an eagle. I was the leader of my group. I felt really good about myself, which I hadn't for a long time. I just think that environment was better for me than where I was at home. But then, I ended up going home and pretty much immediately going back to my old friends and then some new friends, and this was freshman year of high school. So people are starting to get into more stuff, or people that haven't been into stuff are getting into it now. I've been into it for years. But I kind of jumped back in, like not missing and not skipping a beat. And then, got to the point where I had, basically dropped out of school.
Okay.
I just went to home ec because there was this girl I thought was cute, but like at my school, they didn't care. You could just walk out, stand across the street, smoking weed, anything. It's like inner city Dallas school.
Okay.
So basically, no school credits, doing bad stuff, running around in the city, stuff. Yeah, that's the only class I would go to at school.
Okay.
We had like block schedules, so it was like an hour and a half. I'd go to that class, and then the rest of the day I'd just skip. I'd just go hang out with friends. I had a friend whose uncle lived close and did magic, and we'd just go smoke weed, and he'd do magic tricks. And
Really?
yeah, so I definitely wasn't doing school. But yeah, so my mom took me to a couple other yeah, and I don't want to go too much into it because I mean, I was into some pretty serious
that's fine.
stuff and trouble to where it definitely, my mom was definitely frantic, and rightfully so. Like I said, I was convinced that I was going to live on the streets at 15. I'd done it for a whole summer after 8th grade year. Before I went to Utah, I lived on my own for 3 months. Doing all kinds of really, really bad stuff to stay out there, but which is really what landed me in these places. So my mom took me to this place, Kiski, in Virginia. Really nice preparatory school. Like I said, people from around the world will send their children there to get a good education. So I was like, I'm not going to last here. I'm like, I'm a bad kid. I need something, maybe a little different than this, not super crazy. I didn't want lockdown, but so then she took me to this place called Massanutten, which was also in Virginia, as a military school. And I go for a day because both these places are voluntary, as was Aspen, where I was. So, but there I went around with this kid for a day, and it was nuts. They had disconnected the smoke detectors. They were smoking in the rooms. I saw like 3 fights. They were talking about doing acid in the rooms, and I was like, this place is gonna make me worse, you know.
Yeah.
And so my mom was like, I can't go to either of these two places, and she's like, you choose, or you're gonna go to the hard place. So I already knew about escorts, which are the goons that come, you know, grab you.
Right.
And I knew about lockdowns. I knew Provo wasn't the only one, you know, but I knew what they were, and I knew it's like worse than jail. Like you don't want to go there, right? So I was like mad, and I was like, you know how you do when you're a kid, back and forth with your mom, and I ain't going nowhere, right? So I think it was like 2 days after that. I'm in my bedroom, 10:30 at night, and I hear knock on my bedroom door, and I'm like, what the heck? I'm like knocking on my door at 10:30 at night, and it was my mom. I said, what are you doing out there? And she's like, someone's here to see you. And I'm like, yeah, right. You know, you're not letting anybody in here at 10:30 at night to see me. You know. I open the door, and it's 2 big old mullets standing right there.
Mullets.
Like, yeah, just big old hillbilly. Apparently, it's they're Texas Rangers that are off.
Okay.
And like do this, yeah, not the baseball players. Like they do this like as a side gig, you know. And so they just grab me, boom, by my arm, like, you're going with us, you're going with us. We got you enrolled. There's no nothing. And I'm just like, being dragged through, you know. And I'm looking at my mom, and she's like crying, and her friends there like comforting her. And I'm like, don't do this, don't do this, you know. And they're like, we got you enrolled, we got you enrolled. And they threw me in the back of a truck, like this little space, and just drove me overnight to Missouri. Just bam, right there. That's it. So, like,
Kind of sounds like kidnapping.
it felt like it,
Yeah.
for sure. But it, you know, I knew my mom had paid him and hired him, you know. So, I mean, I knew like not to fight it, because like I knew, you know, just these are big old Texas Rangers, you know what I mean? I'm a 15-year-old punk. So, anyways, I get to Missouri. They pull up to Missouri. This is where it all starts, man. Freaking Agape, man. This is the craziness right here. So, this is 97. So we pull up, and I remember just thinking, what in the like backwoods, you know, inbred, country bumpkin, weird llamas. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
what is this thing over here? What is this place? Nothing good happens over here. I'm just looking at these like crappy trailers, weird little animals, not in like nice cages or nothing, and like a little church. And so they wanted me to go have breakfast with them, the 2 guys that kidnapped me, and I'm like, nah, man, no. I was like, get out of my face as soon as you can, you know, and trying to be friendly with me and stuff. So I get in to Agape. Here I am. Bam. First person I meet, boom, Brother Brian.
Oh,
Big blonde.
the infamous Brian. Yes.
Yeah. And, yeah, you know, just a character, but just like way like overacting of a character, you know. But I get in there, he's sitting at his desk, and he's just like, take that earring out your ear. You know, and I'm like, okay, you know, and I'm not trying, you know, I'm not giving him any attitude, nothing. I'm just there, because I'd already been in Utah, and you know, I realized there, you know, bucking them, it's not going to get you anywhere. You know, they've got you. They got you. That's all there is to it. So he starts talking. He's like, blah, 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 and I'm just sitting here thinking, like, man, this guy's like I can't tell if he's really friendly, or because he's really like smiling the whole time and laughing. He's like, you can run, but if you run, I'm gonna yell Sizzler, and anybody who catches you gets a steak dinner in town at Sizzler.
Sizzler.
And,
I haven't heard that name in a long time.
Yeah. Sizzler. If anybody yells Sizzler, everybody's looking to see who's attacking.
Right.
I'm saying everybody wants that steak dinner. So he told me that. He's like, and they're not going to be nice when they catch you. He's like, they're going to do anything they want to you when they catch you. And I'm like, okay, noted. You know, I'm not going to run. So then he brings in my buddy. He's like, this is your buddy. You got to stay 3 feet in front of him. I think it's 3 feet. Some guy said 5. I remember it being 3, but God, maybe that's just because I had kind of a strict buddy that was. But anyways, like, you gotta stay in front of him all the time. You gotta do everything he says. And he brings in, you know, this big black dude. His name was I'm not gonna say his name,
Okay.
but some of us still know who he is. But anyways, he was like the toughest black dude at the school for sure. And we come in there, and he's like, "Oh wait, wrong black." He goes, "You got a problem with black people?" And I was like, "No," you know. But the way he said it was like charging me up, you know, like the gangbangers back home. And I was like, "What is up with this? Like, this guy runs the school, you know?" And he's like, "Oh, wrong black guy. Send in this other guy." And they sent in this other bigger black dude. But turns out, like, that guy was really cool. He was a really cool buddy to me. He was nice. He didn't want to do it. He didn't want to be a jerk. But, of course, they took me away from him after, like, 4 days because he was too nice. But my first day there, this is the first thing I experienced, was we went right from there to play basketball. He's like, "Buddy, we're going to play basketball. If your buddy wants to play basketball, you got to play basketball." So I was really good. I wasn't good at Agape because Agape basketball is not basketball. It's like elbow ball or something like that. You know what I mean? It's slippery floor. After they burned the school down and had that new like surface, it was slippery. So you're slipping and just call your own fouls. It wasn't real basketball. But I started scoring a lot. You know, and I'm right there and I'm scoring a lot. And next thing I know, this guy who's wearing cowboy boots is standing in front of me, guarding me, just starts kicking me in the shins as hard as he can with his cowboy boots, like the back of his cowboy boots. And I'm like, whoa, I'm like, what in the heck? And I'm looking at him kind of crazy. And my buddy is like, you know, don't do anything, don't do anything. I'm like, dude, look at my shin, like, is bleeding from this fool, you know?
Right.
And that's right then where I was like, oh, like, what is going on here? You know, this dude is like definitely assaulting me and laughing about it, and everybody's scared of him. And he was a junior staff member. I only remember his last name, so I won't say it. But he was a country guy from like the Dakotas. Y'all know who I'm talking about. Total jerk. Was junior staff for a long time and used to just beat a lot of kids up all the time and really enjoyed it. But that was like my first experience, and I was just like, this is weird. This is a different place, because all the kids looked real scared of this kid. Some of the kids were being real mean to each other for no reason. My buddy was cool, and I could tell my buddy was like being too cool, you know, and that like they weren't gonna like it. But like my first night there, I was in a dorm, and there was my staff member was named Brother Ben. So Brother Ben was a big black dude, real dark skin, but would wear blue contacts and was like racist against black people. And was like adopted by white people, hated black people. So the first night there, I was there, he beat up this Puerto Rican kid who, you know, Puerto Rican, maybe sometimes they're mixed with black. Maybe he wasn't even black, but like he didn't like him because he looked black. And he just beat him up and down the barracks to teach me a lesson. And that's when I was getting more in shock. And I'm just like, you know, they keep ramping it up. Like, how far is it really going to go over here, you know? So I'm, like, trying to sleep up in this place. It's just a bunch of bunk beds with, like, these giant shell casings on the top of them, just military style. They probably got them from some old military base. But the next morning we stand up, and they're like, get up, get up. They're screaming at us to get up. They smack the side of your bed. If you ever had anybody hit your bed when you're sleeping in it, it's like one of the most disturbing things ever.
Oh, yeah.
It's just, ugh. Yeah, and that's every morning how this one section leader was such a jerk. So we got to stand up, and we all got to stand at attention right next to the bunks. Right away, pop up, lights on, yelling at you first thing in the morning. And they do inspection, like walk by and look at you for whatever, make sure, you know, whatever. And this guy has a watch, a leather watch, and he's just whipping people with it and just staring them in the face like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And comes by and just whips me with it, and I'm just standing there, you know. And that was my first day. You know what I mean? In this, like, crappy, everything's dirty and, like, ghetto. And I was like, my mom didn't know where I am. I was like, my mom didn't know what's going on here. You know, I got to tell her. But they don't let you call home for 30 days. You get a 5-minute phone call after 30 days. Then every 2 weeks you get a 15-minute phone call from like each parent if they want to call you. So, you know, it was going to be 30 days before I could even call my mom, but then they monitor your calls, so there ain't no way. There ain't no way saying anything to them. You don't get to see them for 3 months if they come to see you. So then I think it was either the next day or the next day, I was sitting in school. And so in school it's partitions, like cubicles, because there's no classrooms, there's no teachers. You just sit there and do paces. So it's like 12 paces per grade per subject. So like you got 12 of these books, you do 12 of them, you just went up a grade, you know what I mean? Which was cool for me because being like a year behind, I ended up being a year ahead, which actually got me sent to another place, which I could talk about too after this, but because they didn't want me to graduate so early. They didn't want me coming back home, so they sent me another place to extend me out a year. But yeah, I'm sitting there next to this kid. I'll say his first name was Andy, and he had just got there too. He was from Arkansas, and I'm sitting there, and the way the partitions are, you have like a block up in front of you, wooden block, and you stick a flag in there when you're ready to go score your work, or if you want a staff member to come over help you, they'll walk up in front, you know, and they're looking down on you from the front of your desk. So I'm sitting there, and here comes Brother Burton. I'm sure you heard about Brother Burton. People talk about him, dude, but talk about larger than life character, man. I mean, this guy was 350. Anybody else telling me what they think? I think 354, but just like face of a bulldog, man. Just always like this, and you know, just always mean, huge dude. Looked like a straight up bulldog, man. And he could be friendly. He had a real friendly way about him. A lot of them did, you know. Obviously, that's probably, they're all in sales. They got to get your parents to send you there. But so he comes up and leans over and starts talking to Andy right next to me. And Andy had apparently written 666 in his Bible. I hate God. And so he leans over and says, and Andy, everybody knows how he talks, right? And Andy, he's a preacher. It's like every time he's like, preaches when he talks, every time he talks. So, write 666 in your Bible, you know, and he's just having a conversation with him, and he's like, yeah. He's like, oh, why'd you do that? And he's like, well, because I hate God. Oh, you know, why do you hate God? Oh, I hate God for sending me here. Before he could even get the words out, Brother Burton leaned over, grabbed this kid, pulled him up over the partition, and then just jumped on top of him with that Jurassic elbow. And I always remember Brother Burton having Jurassic elbow. I know people on here are saying it's Brother Brian, but honestly, I don't remember being a specific person. I just remember a lot of elbows. And Brother Burton had a more massive one. But he jumped on top of him like that and was like, if you ever do anything like that again, I'm going to rub your face in the carpet till it's red for a week. And like the volume he was yelling at him, and like he was really rubbing his face in the carpet, and I was just like, oh wait. Before he did any of that, though, and anybody who's ever remember this, Brother Burton had like the fastest hands anywhere. He could whoop you on ping pong, basketball, slap boxing, anything. And he slapped the wooden block to stick your flag in right off, and just boom, right off the kid's face, right before he grabbed him.
Wow.
That's over there. And I'm just like, you know, and of course, even more than to teach that kid a lesson is to teach us a lesson, you know. So at this point, I'm just like, I'm beyond like crapping my pants. You know what I mean? I'm just like, again, where does it stop? Like, this is only my second day. Like, how much worse is it going to get up in here, you know? And I remember talking to somebody, and I said, like, how do you get kicked out of here? And they just, man, they started clowning me so hard. I asked some staff member, and he was like, this one staff member, kind of an older guy, wore glasses. I don't remember his name. I remember almost everybody else there. What's crazy is that I went to 6 different high schools in 5 different states. I don't remember any other teacher's name, but I remember almost everybody from Agape. That place is so intense. They keep your adrenaline up all the time. So, like, everything is burned into your memory and your psyche, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But so then after that, and then they put me with another buddy, and he was just a jerk, always trying to give me push-ups, you know, and I just didn't like being around him. But I wasn't too worried. I was like, you know, I'll get off buddy status relatively quick enough. I'm not going to get in trouble, because a lot of kids who go there, they got real issues. You know, I mean, real learning disabilities, real social issues.
Yeah.
They already got a hard time. So, like, they'll mess up in a normal setting, and now you've got this cult-like setting where it's impossible to follow every rule. You know, they do that on purpose so they can pick and choose who they're going to, you know, make their life miserable and who they're going to elevate. But, you know, yeah, it was a lot of kids that, you know, here it is. You got a hard time growing up. You probably just have parents who they don't know, or they're lazy, or they don't want to create the right environment. They just want to blame you, or there's a million different reasons why your parents would basically put you up for adoption and say, here, y'all do it. And then not check into it and not find out exactly what's going on.
Right.
And then you don't care, you know, in the case of some parents. But, yeah, that's pretty much what I saw going on there, because I was like, a lot of these kids, they can't behave, like they can't do all this extra little stuff, so they're just constantly getting whooped on. You know, like a lot of guys have said, there's definitely a culture of enjoyment at seeing others suffer, you know, and the kids suffer, and that was super, super weird. And that was definitely, like, it's definitely there. You know, and I know you and I talked before kind of about Lester Roloff and like how he kind of started this. So it's probably at all of these schools. But something about Brother Brian was just like so much fuel on that flame, you know. And that's what was probably the most disturbing to me, what was happening to other kids. So a month and a half after I'm there, I'm still on buddy status, I think. Yeah. I'm still on buddy status, right? And again, with buddy status, you get no rights. You got to do everything your buddy wants you to do. If your buddy's on no talking, you're on no talking. And, you know, so 2 a.m, they start waking us up. And they're like, get up, get up, get up, get out, get out. And we get up and we're like, what the heck's going on? So we all get out like single file line, and we file up right in front of we're sitting on the basketball court, and we're right in front of the church, or the school building. So it's a school building. There was a brand new chapel, you know, tall, like vaulted ceiling chapel. Okay. And then the dining hall, and then the kitchen. And we're sitting there like wondering, what are we doing out here? Next thing you know, you see a little light flicker from the side of the school building, and then all of a sudden you see flames, and you're like, whoa. And you're like, and we're sitting right there. The basketball court is right in front, like literally at the steps of the school building. So, and the dorms were just to the side of all that. Just maybe, I don't know, 30, 40 feet, something like that, maybe more. But all of a sudden, just flames. And then it's kind of a slow creep to where you're thinking, like, they're definitely going to put this out. You know what I mean? But, like, nobody showed up. You know, it's like...
Well, they have to give you guys some sort of work. I mean, so burn it down so you guys can build it again.
So, and from my memory, it was on graduation night. So, like, in my head, I'm always thinking, this is some student. Like, that's too much of a coincidence. This is like a pissed off student. But who knows? I mean, yeah, they definitely got, you know, way bigger after that. But we started watching it burning, and nobody came. And then next thing you know, the church starts burning, and you start seeing the flames, and then all of a sudden, boom, backdraft, and like the doors exploded in, and then all the air went in, and boom. I mean, it was nuts. And we sat there till the morning and just watched the whole thing. And then like a little fire, like a fire engine from like 1950s came out. If anybody remembers, just let me know. Yeah, like a little fire engine from the, and like a little old lady. It was only like 2 firemen spraying this like 4 giant building, you know, fire. So anyways, we're all like, hell yeah, we're going home. Yeah, we don't need no way keeping us here, you know. And we were like, yes, you know what I mean, trying to contain our excitement. So the next few days was kind of cool, even like the next couple of weeks, because we didn't do anything. You know, we didn't have anywhere to go. We would just watch movies. We'd go to the lake. So then one day I'm at the lake and sitting up on these rocks, looking down just at the water. And so next thing I know, like Brother Brian is looking me in the eye and yelling at me, saying, "You want to keep giving me hard looks, I'm going to come up there and knock it off." And I didn't even know I was looking at Brother Brian because the sun was like shining off the water, because nobody there would ever give him a hard look, you know? And so as soon as he said that, I tried to tell him, like, I didn't, you know, but there's nothing you can say to him, you know? And I was just like, oh, shit. And he's like, turn around, get on the rocks. So, like, if you don't have a wall, you're just going to stand on whatever's there. So I turn around, put my nose on there, put your hands behind your back. So then we get back to campus. I just go ahead and stand on the basketball pole. There's no walls, so everybody's standing on basketball poles. So I just did this on my own, even though he didn't tell me to, because I was just trying to be extra, because I was like, dude, you know, this guy can make your life hell for real. And so he's like, get off, you don't have to stand on there, you know, get off of there. And I was like, you know, yes, sir, whatever you say. I guess you say sir there, yeah. And so then people are like, man, how'd you get away with giving Brother Brian a hard look? And I was like, yeah, man, I guess, you know, I'm just cool like that or something, you know. So next morning, he's walking by the dorm and he goes, Halford, you're going to boot camp. And I'll never forget that. That's the worst news I ever heard in my whole life. Man. Right there, ever. Because they had just started this part of the program called boot camp. They brought this guy, Brother Vanderkoy, Kentucky guy, from Mississippi, from the Marines, and was going to run boot camp for kids who came back, kids who had to come back to the program. So I would watch what they did. The first one they did was this blonde kid from California, and it was the worst, like, torture I'd ever seen. He just was in a robe. No, you know, they give you these shoes that are oversized with no legs, tongue, so you're just shuffling around everywhere. Him just haul rocks and do, like, exercises in the sand was so hot. It was the middle of the summer at this point, and that you would just see him all day. We were just kind of chilling. There was nothing to do at that time, and I remember just thinking, like, God, that's the worst fate ever. Like, I just got to make sure no matter what, I don't ever have that happen to me. So anyways, shortly after that, he's like, you're going to boot camp. And I'm like, oh my God. So what happens is Brother Vanderkoy comes by and he'll say, boot campers, let's go. And everybody at boot camp got to run and line up. And then boom, it's off to whatever they're going to do. So for me, we went out to the volleyball court. First thing we did. And this guy named Brother Kirk, who used to be a student and was a jerk from California. And first thing he did was just punch me. Bam! Right in the chest. Hard. There's a big dude. And he's like, yeah, I'll give Brother Brian a hard look. And he would punch me out of line and say, get back in line, and then punch me back and just kept punching me so I couldn't be in line.
Yeah.
And was like, you got to get in line. So I was just like, great, you know. And next thing you know, you're raking rocks, which is what we had to do pretty much every morning, just rake rocks, shovel rocks, rake rocks. It's just like torture, you know. It's hot, it's humid out there. So anyways, they take us to the volleyball court, and they're like, you know, we're going to do calisthenics. When I say one, it's push-up position. So if you say one, you got to get in push-up position. Two is like leg lift. So you got to get on your back, put your legs up, all the sand goes in your face, and then up, down, leg lifts. And then three is run in place. So he'd have us doing this till you're like so exhausted, right? And just dying. It's hot, and I mean, all day long. So then what he said is he took this flat soccer ball, and he's like, I'm going to throw this, and whoever brings it back gets to take a rest, gets to sit out the next round, you know? And so we're like, oh, crap, we got to get it, right? So there's this one kid who was always slow. He was always getting us in trouble. He never was doing what he was told. And I guess he was just well-rested from never trying that hard. And he just, like, beelined it to this ball and started coming back with it, like so fast. So when he did that, this other kid from New Orleans, like they're both running at each other, just like clothesline punched him right in the face, just right to the ground. And I was like, oh my God, like that is gnarly, you know. So then this kid's on the ground holding the ball, and everybody goes up, starts punching him, you know. So I'm like, whatever. I go up, I start punching him in the face. You know, it turns into an animal being in there, you know.
Right.
So we're all the ball, you know, and then Brother Vandercool is just like, all right, boys, he's got it. And the kid got to come back and take a rest, you know. And like that was my introduction to boot camp. And I was like, oh my God, like this is insane. And that was the worst thing ever, 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 ever. And they wouldn't hardly ever give you water, just like sprayed out of a hose a little bit. You're just hot. You're doing calisthenics all day. They're screaming in your face, hitting you. You barely get to eat. You got skin coming all off your hands, your feet, making you fight all the time. So then the next day was, I don't know if it was worse than the first day. It's hard for me to decide which was the worst day of my entire life, but it was definitely one of those 2 days. What they had us doing was duck crawling through the area that had been burned out. So we're duck crawling, crouched down, and sifting through this soot is ashes, and this is all day in the Missouri sun in a bunch of burnt ashes, and you're looking for nails. So there's like 8 of us, but you can't go faster than each other, and you can't talk to each other. So like the one kid who was always getting us in trouble would not move, and we couldn't like go anywhere. You couldn't say anything to him, so we just sitting there like crouched down, and then this staff member named Mike, who would just be screaming at us, screaming like so crazy, and then making us do calisthenics the whole time through. And that's when it kind of like shattered my reality, because I didn't know life could be that hard before that, you know.
Yeah.
I've been through some traumatic stuff that was really sad, but like when I went through that, it opened my eyes a lot, to where I was just like, man, I've been living in La La Land, you know?
Yeah.
It was just so I just didn't know the capacity like the human body had for pain and despair, and just they just knew how to like make sure that you never adjusted. You know what I mean? So I finally get out of there, and my mom's like, asked Brother Brian like what happened, and he said, well, I was just testing him. I wanted to test Preston, because I hadn't gotten in any trouble. So he put me in there, and it was super weird because right after I got out of boot camp, they put me as a horse guy, which is a lot of trust. You get to be out there all alone with the animals during school time. You know, no one's watching you, but I was still on no talking, which means you're not trusted. So it was weird, and I hadn't even been there that long. I think I'd just gotten put on red shirt, but still was on no talking. And then people were like, how are you a horse guy on no talking? And I was just, I don't know, you know. But yeah. And so anyways, that was probably the worst part about it, you know. And then going through there just day by day, you know, trying to survive, trying to somehow like tell my mom what was going on. But when I eventually did get to see her, I don't think she really, to her it was better than being in back home, you know, no matter what pretty much was happening to me there.
Do you still have a good relationship with your mom?
Yeah.
Good.
We got a good relationship.
Good.
Yeah, and she's gonna see this, so hey Mom. But my mom's actually been cool about talking about this, you know, like on the Paris documentary. I could tell when she was telling her mom, I felt like her mom was putting on for the camera, and she didn't really care. And she's more just like, oh, we would have been there in a second had we known. And like, I don't believe that at all. You could have found out.
Yeah.
You know, if you cared, you know, you would, yeah. But my mom's...
Go ahead.
I was going to say, it's not, you know, she's past her point of just always telling me, well, you were doing this, you were doing that. You know, and now she's more, you know, feeling you know, it's hard as a parent, I'm sure, to like
Oh yeah.
any of this or think about it, especially it being this many people now coming forward and being for real about it. And we're just trying to validate each other, and let you know that like, hey, back then we were told it was wrong to feel the way we feel, but it's not. And I think watching that Paris documentary basically made it look like her whole life has been her trying to forget about that place, and her finally meeting up and talking with some people from there. It seems like, she actually got to be herself,
Yeah.
because she had to hide it from. She couldn't talk to her parents about it. They didn't want to hear it. Her sister said she didn't even really know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
When
for
you,
me,
yeah, for you,
well, I was just I've been telling these stories for years because I've been in a lot of institutions, not like a bunch of prisoners, but just like other boarding schools. College is an institution. I've been in the military, in the Navy. And you're bored, you sit around, you tell crazy stories, That's probably how I remember a lot of this stuff so well.
now
But also,
you said that to back up just a little bit. You said that they monitored your calls when you called home or when they called you. Did they ever
uh,
monitor or did they ever go over your letters if you wrote any?
yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. And I mean, if you wrote something, I mean, there was times where, like that kid who gets in trouble in boot camp, they would read his letters in front of everybody so we could make fun of him.
Oh man.
Because he was kind of gone in the head, and he would talk about how like his brain, the gears in his brain can't turn because he doesn't have syrup. Because like we weren't allowed to have like any sugar if you're in boot camp, and like he really believed, he was like telling his mom this, like, my gears can't work, and it's kind of crazy. But of course they're just reading in front of everybody, making fun of him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they monitor everything. So, and I'm sure you've heard this, like you can't even have a conversation without a junior staff or staff member monitoring it.
Yeah.
And that's
There was a
cool.
lady there was a lady from the Bethesda home, and her parents told her if things are going wrong there, and of course hindsight's 2020. Now we can kind of look back at this. She said, spell the word deer, spell it wrong. That way we'll know something is wrong. So she
Yeah,
did. And they came in and they got her and started a whole investigation. So over one word, you know what I mean? So
cool. That's smart.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, what happened at Agape was when I got there, it was a lot of like really bad kids. I mean, but okay, let me just say I don't believe there's any bad kids. I'm a dog behaviorist. I work with extreme cases every day. I'm rehabbing pit bulls and dogs that are on death row. No problem. There's no bad dogs. I believe kids are the same way. There's no bad kids. They just react to their environment.
yeah,
Different ones need different environments. I wasn't gonna be the same as my big sister who was really perfect, and did the school thing and everything really well. For me, I was different. I needed something different. So there was a lot of kids who were doing extremely bad things. Like you could tell, like if you're not here, you're gonna be in prison for sure or dead. You know. And what happened was they kind of started transitioning. I want to say after James Griffey got there, which I say his name right because
yeah,
he's done. Yeah. So because he got beat up so bad, and I was right there, and I'll tell you that story in a second, from my point of view. But after that, like they started taking different kinds of kids. It was like kids who weren't quite as major. So, but the difference was like these kids' parents would pay their bills on time. These kids' parents cared about like what was happening to them. Before that, then none of our parents cared. You're not gonna tell some gangbanger, mom, he's getting shot at. Oh, they put me in a headlock. She's not gonna care.
yeah,
Well, you're not shot at like your brother or whatever.
yeah.
So, but after that, and I forget if ma'am told this to my mom or my mom, because I remember her telling me like they told her that like these kids' parents weren't paying their bills, and so they had to kind of start changing the way they were doing things, because, like I said, those kids' parents would check into what's going on. Well, when I got there, it wasn't none of that. It was, you just knew. The most shocking thing about it to me, honestly, it wasn't what the staff was doing, is the fact that, like, the government was allowing it. The state of Missouri in the United States. I could not believe this was, like, going on. And no one's checking in on it. No one's coming to talk to us. It's not like every once in a while something happening. This is like all day, every day. Like, that's our entertainment, is people getting slammed and getting in fights. But yeah, so, and then...
You said James Griffey, you were going to go to that?
Yeah, I'll go to that.
Okay.
Yeah, because that was crazy. So, I don't remember how long I'd been there at this point, but I'd definitely been there, good enough time to know what was going on. I think I was off, no talking, which I got off pretty quick, actually, after boot camp. But I'm sitting in the dorm, and all of a sudden, this staff member named Brother Hannaford, who was like this, big, just disgusting staff member guy. I remember my name was HALFORD, his name was Hannaford, so he was always acting like that we were buddies somehow, but just a weird, really gross guy. Would burp and fart all the time, and just obnoxious, over the top obnoxious is what I'm getting at here. Anyways, but a big dude. He bursts in the door holding this new kid that I'd never seen before. And I heard Jimmy's story about saying how he came out there at the golf course. I remember going to the golf course. I don't remember him coming out there, though. But I remember my hands bleeding from the golf club because I'd been digging with a digging pole before that. Okay. So every time I would swing the golf club, I'd have just blood pouring out out of my hand. But so anyways, I'm sitting there, and here comes Hannaford with this new kid, which was James Griffey, and just boom, slams right on top of him, literally like a foot away from me, almost like on top of me, slams this kid. And from what I remember, Griffey said God, actually like said G-O-D, and that was the hugest no-no there, And I was thinking how funny this is that all these guys there tried to act like these big, tough guys, but at the same time, they're like these Amish. Like, you can't even watch a PG-13 movie, you know what I mean? And so they'd have to cuss at us. They'd have to call us a sissy lala. You sissy lala. Like, that's the worst insult.
Seems kind of funny. So
yeah, you couldn't say darn. You couldn't say crud. I mean, you'd get in big trouble for saying that stuff. Huh. So you could only say their cuss words, which was stinking. Everything was stinking. Yeah, stinking and sissy la la, and that was it. So to say God was like, oh, yeah. And you're talking about cult mentality where these people will like kill for whatever they believe in, and everyone else is the enemy, and everybody doesn't do the way we do it, and so you're not just defending like God, you're defending all these other people, and that's why somebody was talking to me. My mom's was like heard this podcast. She's like, did Brother Brian have an enforcer? And I was like, I don't remember anybody being like specifically his enforcer, but I was like, everybody was his enforcer. I was like, you didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
I was like, told you to do something, you had to do it. Everybody was it. But anyways, he just said God, and I remember thinking, oh no.
Uh-oh.
And he said, don't take the Lord's name in vain. And he said, I won't, God. And I could tell that James was in shock. Like he couldn't control what he's saying. It's just like, you've just got this gigantic, country dude. He used to wear like a cowboy hat and boots everywhere on top of you, shaking you. And you're just saying stuff because you're like freaked out and shocked,
Right, yeah.
He just reared back and headbutted him and right in the face. split his head open, blood gushing out, and then just cocked back and is like pounding him into the ground. And I'm just like, oh my God, like that's way over the top even for here, you know. So people finally grabbed him and pulled him off, and then I think he went away for a little bit after that. Like he wasn't around after that. I know he got reprimanded a little bit for going that over the top,
Oh, I'm sure.
but not publicly, you know, like it wasn't like they were gonna tell us. But I remember him, you know, not being there. And then they ended up making me a section leader. So I was in charge of a dorm of guys, which was cool because now I could like take showers as long as I wanted, use the toilet as long as I wanted, you know, 'cause other than that, it's just a few minutes and it's like, you know, when they tell you you can. The downside of it is anytime someone has to go to the restroom at night, they got to wake you up and you got to give them permission. But I got over that quick. It didn't bother me. Yeah, it was cool. The thing about it was, though, you know, like I was saying, there's a lot of kids who really, really had serious issues there. So we can't sit here and say that, like, you could be lax on these kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because these are the kids who, and me especially, if I would find any little chink in your armor, any way I could get out of there, anything I could do, you know. But I mean, if you didn't slam somebody, you know, and you were a section leader and you didn't like consistently slam somebody, I mean, they're definitely going to take your position from you. But the guys in your dorm, they're not going to listen to you either.
Right.
You know, and that's kind of the culture there. And I remember them coming up to me and telling me, we're not going to do slamming anymore. We're not going to do so much of this anymore. So here's a notebook. I want you to write down every time these guys do something. And I remember thinking, man, these kids don't care about a notebook, you know?
Yeah.
And I never would. I was able to, like, do it when I had to do it just to get my point across. I never punched any of my guys, but I'd slam them. You know, like I had one kid, he was a special needs kid, for real. And he had seizures. People know what I'm talking about. They used to make him fight the other special needs kid in the sand pit. And he was on steroids for the seizures, and I swear it made him, like, super strong. Like, he was ripped, like Rambo, and little young kid. But I used to joke around with him because I felt bad for him. But then he wouldn't listen to me when I'd be like, you need to get back on the wall and this and that. And I ended up having to slam it. It was funny. He ended up kind of like slamming me, and I could not believe how strong that kid was. But I eventually got control of him. But, like, you'd have to do that every once in a while. But, like, I had friends. I had a friend named Jeff. I don't even remember his last name. He was a blonde kid from California. Nicest kid, like a sweet kid. You know what I mean? And they made him a section leader just because he'd been there a long time and hadn't get in trouble. And he could not handle it. I mean, he would beat kids up so bad and lose his temper in a rage. It was just really bad.
Yeah.
I mean, he was in the dorm next to me, and I would see him just kicking guys up in the corner, just kicking them. And all the staff saying, really, you know, it just stressed him out way, way too bad, you know. But, yeah. And then probably one of the sickest things I saw was when they made those two special needs kids fight, or they made one of them fight a staff member. Like, I think it was Brother Bryant or something. No, it was that junior staff guy I was telling you about, kicked me in the shins.
Right.
He was a jerk, man. I just remember his last name. You know, he was a jerk, and he used to always get into it with this little kid named Scott, 13 years old. This is a kid that Brother Brian beat up, and then Brother Brian disappeared after that. We're going to talk about that in a second. But they had him fight this other kid, and when you fight in the sand pit, it's just soggy basketball or boxing gloves. Soggy filled with sand. So they don't teach you how to fight either. Just like get out there and fight, you know.
Right.
So they would have these kids fight, and of course the one that was on the seizure medication, he would beat this kid. He wouldn't fight. He would just curl up in a ball. So probably one of the worst things I saw is they held him out like Jesus. Like just like Jesus. It was Brother Brian and Brother Jesus each held an arm, and this junior staff member who's a big dude, I think it was 18 at the time, went up and just boom right in the face on this little kid. And I remember like getting sick to my stomach and like, yeah, I don't know. I think everybody else did too. But, you know, and Brother Brian, I mean, you cannot ever over exaggerate like how sick and twisted that individual was. You
Don't
know what I mean?
don't forget sadistic.
Sadistic, everything. So what he did one time was he showed us this video with this preacher. And this cracks me up. Have you ever watched the Ollie G show?
Yeah.
And I know you know about Borat, right? So like, I'm watching the Ollie G show on HBO years later, way before the movie came out. I used to love watching this with my mom. And when he does the one on religion, he has this guy come on and he says like, I'll give you $100,000 if you can prove that, you know, we came from a monkey. And Ollie G goes, have you ever eaten a banana? And he goes, yeah. And he goes, there you go. It's like, give me my money. But he accuses this guy of leaving a floater in the toilet. And I remember like half of the show is just like him saying, that ain't right. That ain't right. You leave a floater in the toilet. And this guy, you know, he's like this preacher. But I recognize this preacher because Brother Brian had shown us this video with this guy in like 19, you know, it was 98 or 99 about how the world was going to end in the year 2000, Y2K. And this dude had graphs and charts and Bible verses, and it was like this 2-hour thing of him going through the timeline and blah, 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 and the world's going to end, and it's terrifying. You know, it stresses you out, just like how the media likes to do us today, right?
Yes.
So doing that, I'm freaked out so bad to the point where I'm like, I have to get to a phone and call my mom. She has to dig a bunker underground and save up water. And I'm like freaked out.
Wow.
And so I go up to Brother Burton, and I'm like, Brother Burton, you know, what are we going to do? And he goes, ain't nothing going to happen. And I said, what? I was like, didn't you just watch what we watched? He said, ain't nothing going to happen. And I remember that, like, just calming me all the way down. Because I had respect for Brother Burton, and as much as you can respect anybody that works there. You know, if you're a student and you work there, to me, it's a little different. You're still a kid. You may be scared of going home. You don't have much options, and hey, here's a job. You don't have to go back to your parents, whatever. You might be brainwashed, you know. But people who, like, of their own free will, you know, and grown-ass adults going to do that, I got, you know, there's only so much respect I could have. But I did have some for Brother Burton because he was kind of cool. And I remember just thinking, like, damn, you know, how much words can affect you.
Oh yeah.
And, like terrified, more terrified than I've probably ever been, because I think the world is going to end, and that, like, you know, everyone's going to die, and all this stuff is just about to happen. And Brother Brian just loved that shit. Look, man, they used to, and I know everybody remembers it. Tell me this isn't the craziest ever, man. They used to turn off all the lights and play this recording of these caves deep in Mexico and say that's what hell sounds like. And it's like supposedly billions of screams, you know, and like, and they would turn off, listen to it.
I think that's on YouTube. I think it was they were doing some mining, not mining, but they were digging a hole for oil or something, and they hit something, and it sounded like hell. Yeah, yeah. I've heard it. I've heard it.
Yeah, and Brother Brian just got extreme pleasure from stuff like that, you know. And like I said, I don't think you could ever exaggerate enough, like, who that guy was and what he was to people. And for me, through all this and thinking about it as an adult, you know, some of the worst things they did was like the no talking. You know, because you put that red wristband on, and then you literally can't socialize. You know, you don't get the human interaction.
Yeah.
And you're a kid, and then they also take all these other privileges from you when you're on no talking. Can't play certain sports, can't have, like, certain food. But the worst part about it, you don't know how long you're going to be on it. And, you know, like somebody was saying in another video, if Brother Brian put you on it, no one else could take you off of it. And he would purposely forget, you know. And I was talking to my friend the other day, I think he might come on the show, but he said, you know, he was on for 9 months. And I remember this dude they could not break him. He was probably one of the only ones I've seen like that. Like, he was on no talking for 9 months. he was in a robe, and I remember just made Brother Brian like so furious that everything he did to this kid, he just had the attitude of, I don't care. He wasn't mad. He was actually kind of happy. You know, I mean, we'd kind of joke around, you know, because you'd find ways to talk and to communicate.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Really hard. It'd be dangerous because if that person got caught and they're trying to get out of trouble, or they could be trying to bust you, you know. So you didn't really know who to trust. And then sometimes people would have these, you know, epiphanies, and then they'd turn around and then they'd want to turn you in for stuff that y'all used to be cool doing, you know, which was just like talking about anything you're not supposed to, or really just talking without staff. But yeah, one time we planned a riot. We had a riot planned, and because this one kid planned it, and we used to talk every night. Every night we'd be sitting by the bed, and we would just talk about stuff, whatever bad stuff you could talk about, just the worst stuff you could talk about, you know, drugs and girls, and you know, just street life and violence and exciting stuff, you know, the worst stuff. But he decided he wanted to, like, let's take over the ranch, you know. I'm like, hell yeah, you know, like if you're serious and you get enough people to do it, I was like, what have we got to lose, man? Jail is better than this place. You know what I mean? You got more rights in jail, like,
Yeah.
why not? You know, we're all minors, you know. So we planned it, and I think I had like a fingernail file, like a little clippers, but there's so many kids were in on it. And we were just like, I don't know if it was really going to happen. I don't know who really was down to do it. I mean, I was. You know, like I said, they keep you're crazy in that place. You know, like, what have I got to lose anyways? You know, like, I don't have any feelings for you guys that are good anyways. But one kid ended up, like, feeling bad or something and telling on everybody. And that was major. The kid who planned it that I used to talk to every night, I mean, they gave him boot camp so bad, it was anaily, and for days and days and days. And I remember Brother Brian came up to me and was like, Halford, I know you knew about it, but there was too many of us. He just couldn't do anything. I didn't say, I said, no, I didn't. You know what I mean? But he couldn't single out. There's so many of us. But, like, that kid, he definitely turned around after that and was like, didn't want to talk about anything bad, you know, and they shell shocked him with that one.
They broke him. They broke him. Yeah.
Now, in fairness to him, I mean, he's my friend to this day, and he won't quite tell it like that because I'm pretty sure he, you know, believes what they believe to an extent, at least. But in my opinion, you know, that's just what happened. I knew right then, like, okay, I'm not talking to him anymore. No way. Like, that's dangerous, you know. But you had to be real careful with your friends there, big time. You know, especially because as soon as they put you up in rank, one of the first things, if you become junior staff, they're gonna make sure you screw over your friends, you know. But yeah, and I was raised non-denominational Christian.
Okay.
And then I did go to a Baptist, First Baptist downtown Dallas, which the preacher there now has been on Fox News tons of times and stuff. That was a little different for me. I didn't quite like the Baptist style, but they had a good single parent department. But the church part, I didn't like. And, you know, I was raised non-denominational. You wear blue jeans, you have a rock band on stage. We don't answer to any other church. It's your church. It's your people. We read from the Bible. We do what Jesus did, which is not controlling people through religion or a church. That's why they killed him. So when I got to Agape, all I thought was like, this is some David Koresh, like, the Christian. You know what I mean? This is some cult, like, weird that, you know, girls got to wear these pants and you can't drink Coca-Cola because they're evil company, and, you know, like, all these extra rules. And then the weirdest one is any music with drum beat makes you horny. So, and that's a lot of them. So, like, when I got out of there, I think that covers, like, most of the abuse. I mean, I don't know how I could possibly. I remember so much of this, and And a lot of it's because I told these stories because they're so crazy. And it's not that I'm laughing about this or it's funny or
Right.
making light. Because like I said, there's a lot of really sensitive people that went there, and it's really messed them up. I always kind of chose to look at them as like laughing at them. Like I said, like these some like Branch Davidian like idiot morons that it's funny to me. You know what I mean? That's how I had to look at it. Because other than that, you're gonna be a victim, and like they're gonna break you, and then you're gonna have to do what they want to get happiness. And that's this cult mentality right there. I mean, I was in the Navy. They do the same thing at boot camp. You know what I mean? Like, the difference is, if you go to the military, like, you already know, like, I'm going to die for whatever you tell me to. I got to, you know what I mean? Whereas, like, if you're in a cult, it's more like, you know, they're gonna convince you to do. If you go to the military, it's already, you're already there. You're already volunteering. I'm willing to die for my country. But these people, you know, that are in these other type of mentalities, you know, they just want you to answer to them over everything else, right? So, yeah, but it's so crazy. There's so many things that happen. I mean, one of the crazier things that happened, I was a section leader, and then I heard Brother Allen. So here's the thing about Brother Brian. I always thought that he's not Brother Clemenson's son. He's a stepson. He's Mam's son from another guy, and Brother Allen is actually Brother Clemenson's son. I could be wrong about that. I don't know why I always thought that, because Brother Brian was always so jealous of Brother Allen. Brother Allen, like, had the looks and the personality, and he just was like, and Brother Brian was like the ghetto, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you know, I just felt like he was jealous, and he wasn't Brother Clemens' real son. I could be wrong about that, but Brother Allen comes up to Brother Burton. We're on a work detail, and I didn't work at this time. I just supervised. And he comes up and he says, "Oh, man, we got a worse kid than we've ever had before. Like, I don't know who we're going to give him to." And Brother Burton goes, "Halford." And he goes, "Halford? Really?" Because when Brother Allen had seen me, I'd always been, you know, real chill on my passive behavior. Brother Burton had seen me when I was laying down the law as a section leader, you know. So it's a different side. But he's like, "Halford, really?" He's like, yeah, Halford. Give him to Halford. And so I'm like, I'm pissed because I'm already section leader. I don't want a buddy, and I damn sure don't want the worst one that's ever come through the program. So they bring this kid, Miguel, from Mexico City. And I could already tell, like, this is not going to be good for me because I'm pissed. I don't want to do this job. I'm probably going to get along with this kid because where I'm from is mostly come from a Mexican area, and I was hanging in the streets with guys just like him. So I didn't tell him anything. He just came in, and I was just like, "What's up?" And, like, you couldn't have told this kid anything anyways. We're sitting at this table, and there was a guy there who, he talked real effeminate, like real effeminate in his movements and everything. And when he first got there, I mean, it was definitely hell for him for months. And they tried to beat, like, the masculinity into him because that's their way, you know.
Yeah.
But it became apparent to everybody that he was not going to change. Like, that's who he was. But he got respect. He ended up getting respect after there a while, and you didn't make fun of him. You didn't talk bad about him. He had respect. You know what I mean? So he comes up to the table and starts talking, and my buddy, the guy who had just gotten there, starts making fun of him. And he starts going, "Ah," and, like, doing his hand like that. And the staff member there named Vesna, he says, "Don't you, make fun of him." Vesna, hardcore dude from LA, one of the toughest people I've ever met. Really cool, but super tough. He was on junior staff at this point. And, like, you don't tell Vesna no, you know what I mean? You're not going to talk back to him. And so he started making fun of him again. And he didn't see Vesna. I told him to stop. And he says, "I told you to stop." My buddy just stands up and goes, "Ain't nobody tell me what to do," and picks up a chair and just, like, busts Vesna in the head with it.
Oh.
And then gets, like, crazy kick, like how you kick a door in. And I was like, "Oh, no," So I jump on my buddy, grab him. I got him in a headlock. And Vesna's, like, punching him, punching me at the same time. and then my buddy ends up like biting his chest, and
Oh.
I don't know if he got like a chunk out of it or what. But then brother Ron came over. Ronald McDonald, I think, was his actual name.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what they call him.
his actual name was Ronald McDonald. So I always thought he was kind of one of the cooler staff. Again, I mean, you can only be so cool being a staff there because brother Brian's gonna make sure you're a jerk.
Right.
But I thought he was one of the cooler ones. He was married to one of the daughters. You know, that was his way into the royal family. He was missing a finger. I remember that about him too. And he slammed my buddy for like 30 minutes up all around the dining hall, which was the dining hall was the school at the same time as the church, because we had basically built the new building. You know, everything that couldn't be done with the big machine, we did it, and we did everything in there. And he just slammed him, ripped his shirt all to shreds for like 30 minutes, and you could tell it wasn't really doing nothing to my buddy. You know, he was out of breath, but you could just tell like you weren't gonna break him. So next day we had to put him through boot camp. So I was running boot camp half of the day. I was so far ahead of my schooling that they were trying to slow me down so I wouldn't graduate too early, and they would have me run boot camp half the day. It was much easier than when I had done it like a year before. It's still, I wouldn't want to do it, but it was nothing compared to like kids. They were still making kids fight though.
Yeah.
So like when a kid first got there, some of us, they would tell us go box them, you know, as just an introduction to Agape. You're going to get boxed up by some, you know, high-ranking or tough kid here. So we put my buddy through a whole day of boot camp, and we're like, all right, we're going to have him box the biggest, toughest guy here, which was that guy who was supposed to be my buddy when I first got there. And you could tell he didn't really want to do it, you know, because a lot of us, we don't want to just beat up a kid just to beat him up. You know, there's definitely kids there who were junior staff, section leaders, whatever, that enjoyed it and were like Brian, you know, and would get off on it. But a lot of us didn't like it. And he goes in, and my buddy just, bam, just knocked him with one right to the ground. And we're like, oh, my God, dude, like we just ran through a whole day of boot camp. What are we going to do? Yeah. They put another guy up to him, knocked him down. Another guy. And then Brother Vandercoy comes up to me, and he's like, all right, you got to box him because you're his buddy, but, like, you can't lose. And I'm like, all right. You know, because, like, you're his buddy. Like, you cannot lose. And I'm like, all right, you know. So, and I would box a few times, but I never was, like, no big boxer or anything. And then he's like, I'm going to blow the whistle at 2 minutes no matter what. So we start boxing, and, like, I can't get my head up. I cannot get my head up. And I'm like, this guy's so fast. And I end up, like, pump faking and getting him with an uppercut 2 or 3 times in a row. And I swear I was going to get him. And then Brother Vandercoy blew the whistle. So that was pretty much it. And me and my buddy were, and with him, it was always kind of like, it was iffy if he was going to do what I said. And I definitely had to slam him sometimes, but like if your buddy's smart, he's going to tell you like, look, buddy, I'm going to have to like slam you and give you push-ups and scream at you in front of these people, you know. But that if I don't do that, they're going to take you away and give you to somebody much worse, you know. Yeah. So I would do that to him from time to time and be like, you know, you got to play the game. And he eventually kind of learned how to play the game. But one of the funniest things ever about this kid was that I could walk by any staff member that I didn't like, which was really all of them. But there are some that I just really didn't like more than others. And I could be like, hey, like my staff member, Brother Park, I really didn't like him. He was a student before, you know, so like I said, I cut him kind of some slack. But I'd walk by and I'd say, hey, Brother Park, Miguel said he could beat you at wrestling, you know. Knowing that Miguel had never said that, but neither one of them were going to back down, you know, just knowing the mentality of these guys. Like, if you told him that, and he's going to go, oh, yeah, did you say that? And Miguel's going to go, yeah, you know. And next thing you know, Miguel would, like, toss these staff members. And I was just like, this is, like, the best thing ever, you know. Then, except for like one time, Brother Leo, this big guy that came in later, right when I was about to leave, he was so much like Brother Brian, but like even uglier and even just Shrekier. And like, they would play basketball and they would be like the face so red, like elbows so hard, like like, oh my God, this is grown ass men acting like this. You know what I mean? And they're running our lives. This is who runs our life. So he tossed Brother Leo. And you're talking about, Miguel was a little dude, and he could toss anybody. Brother Leo got so mad that he finally got on top of Miguel, like put his knee on him. I thought he was going to crush his chest plate. But I will say this, though. Brother Vandercoy was like the toughest guy I've ever seen. Like, he went up to Brother Vandercoy and started slapping his boots, because I did the same thing. I said, hey, Brother Vandercoy, Miguel said he could beat you at wrestling. Brother Vandercoy didn't care, though, because he was so tough. Like, he didn't have an ego.
Right.
And, you know, he was just like, Miguel, get out of here, Miguel. And Miguel wouldn't slapping his boots. And Brother Vandercoy just got up and grabbed both of Miguel's wrists in one hand and threw him like 10 feet down the aisle. If I'm lying, I'm frying. I mean, anybody can tell you, brother. I saw Brother Vandercoy, like, that guy, Brother Kirk, that was punching me when I first got in boot camp. I saw Brother Vandercoy hook a digging bar in between his legs and just lift him up with one arm just up in the air. Like, it was gnarly. And this guy, Brother Vandercoy, used to drag his own little kids around by the ear and make them stand on the wall. And then, like, his 4-year-old kids, like, he had a 4- and 5-year-old son, and they would fist fight, like, in the face, full on. And, like, I remember one time the kid was like, he punched me in the face. And he told the other one, like, you have to let him punch you in the face now because you punched him in the face. Wow. So he's, like, having his little 4- and 5-year-old just punch each other in the face as hard as they can. He was gnarly, dude. He used to keep rabbits right there, but, I mean, for eating, they'd skin them and eat them. And, you know, and that's basically what it was there. You know, when it comes down to it, it's a place of punishment. It's a place of suffering, you know?
Kind of like a gladiator school, basically.
It's weird, you know, because that's what go to the top is the tougher guys. But what the worst was just like when they gave people buddies who should not have buddies, you know, really, really unstable people. And they would give them really, really bad buddies because their way of like trying to get these special needs kids in line was you just got to beat them up more, you know, and restrict them more. And they would give them to these buddies that they knew were just going to beat the crap out of them, were unstable themselves, you know.
That's a shame. Yeah.
And that, yeah, it's just, I don't know why they could never figure out that, like, you can't just force some of these kids and bully them into, you know, being like, don't you think this kid would stop licking his plate if he could? Like, this kid Scott, I remember his little blonde kid, he wouldn't stop cussing, and that just blew our minds because, like, you know, everybody learns, you know, don't cuss when you're there, and he just wouldn't. I mean, I don't know how long. It was months probably. And they would have him standing on the wall with no plate. He couldn't have a plate because he licked his plate. So he'd have to go through the line, and they'd put spaghetti and then the sauce and a meatball, and he'd have to walk back to the wall and be sitting there,
and eat it,
all rashes all over his body, you know, just stuck on the wall all the time. And then these staffers beating him up periodically. And what actually happened with him that made Brother Brian leave was we built that new building, and it was Brother Brian's pride and joy. So this kid was on there poking it with a pencil, and he just went up and grabbed the kid, and all I saw was Brother Brian's, like, elbow going back, you know, because he was on top of this kid punching him. And I mean, this was such a little kid that was even shocking, even for me having been there for well over a year at that point. But after that, I didn't see Brother Brian. I never saw Brother Brian again after that. He was just gone. And I think because that's when they were starting to try to transition into less push-ups, less slamming, you know, which sounds like it didn't work out for him. But that's when they had come up to me and told me, like, we're trying to get away from doing that. And I was like, yeah, right. How am I going to control these guys? You know, like, because I did it, but and it, obviously it's not necessary because, like I said, in Utah, you know, they would just sit down and we'd have I feel statements. And that was it. We were good. And we didn't have, that would fix our problems, and then we'd get back to hiking and we'd be working together and we'd be building fires and, at Agape, just go fight, it's just weird. And I guess that's appealing to some parents, we're going to whip your kid into shape, and they want that,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Some of them, parents are pissed off at their kids,
It happens. Well,
Yeah.
Preston.
So that's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot to
Yeah.
digest, man.
Yeah.
Like I said, we can do this again if you have more stories for us. But
Yeah. And, I did go to another place after that, which was called Bob Jones Academy.
oh, Bob Jones. Wow.
Yeah, if you heard of that.
I've heard of Bob Jones. Yes, he was. Him and Lester Roloff were like this. They were buddies.
hmm
Yeah.
And so Agape would have looked at Bob Jones as being like way too liberal. Because when I got there, what happened was I was going to graduate in 6 months, and my parents didn't want me coming home, so they found a place I could go, and it would be like halfway through my junior year. So I do half a year there, summer, then come back do my senior year. So I went and lived in the college dorms, but went to the high school with like what was for missionary kids. But it wasn't as strict, and it wasn't punishment. This is just school for those kind of kids.
Right.
Grow up like that. Same deal with music, but like girls could wear shorts when they played sports, and I think that's why Agape probably wouldn't agree with them right there.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. But yeah, man, I mean, I definitely had nightmares of that place as far as like what is done to me. And it's not necessarily even that you're there, it's that feeling of like claustrophobia. Like you're in a place and that was the hardest thing to accept, was like I'm looking down the barrel of years at this place. Because in my head, no matter what situation I was ever in before that, I always was like, there's a way out. But that was the hardest thing. And I think today as an adult, sometimes if you're going through a hard time and things are bad, you kind of click back there a little bit. You know what I mean? But hopefully through all this, we can at least, get some guys and girls to realize like what happened to us really wasn't right, because when we first got on Facebook, like I said, it'd been 17 years since I never thought I was going to talk to anybody from Agape again. And I've never talked to anybody from the Aspen Achievement Academy. I don't even remember anybody's last name from there. But all of a sudden, I got a friend request and then tons of friends from Agape, and it was like, whoa, it was weird. I wasn't even sure if this stuff had really happened. I mean, it was, but I never thought I was going to have anybody to corroborate what I was saying, And then we had pages for us, and there would be guys that would get on there and they would basically bully anybody who said it was hard at Agape. And they'd be like, you guys are sissies, it wasn't that bad. And so I know that was kind of an issue there for a while, to the point where the admin created a whole other page. And for guys who'd been there at a different time, because if you weren't there at the same time, you really can't speak on what anyone else went through.
Right. Right.
Especially because Brother Brian was such a huge factor in all that. But I think that's why a lot of guys didn't want to speak up, because a lot of guys don't want to admit that it was hard, and they want to put on this persona, but they still might have that mentality that comes from Agape. That mentality didn't just come from Agape. We had a lot of gangbangers there. A lot of guys were bullies even before they got there, and they probably still are to this day.
Yeah.
But I think that might have stopped some guys. But just because you admit that it was hard, doesn't mean that you're being a sissy or a crybaby or anything. And at the end of the day, all I want to do is put the facts out there. I just want to say the facts of what happened, and let society and whoever else wants to be the judge it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because obviously I think it's wrong. I wouldn't have said anything, any of those instances I talked about. I wouldn't even brought them up if I didn't think they were wrong, But I just think maybe today things come out, where people, we never thought anybody would care. Nobody cared when we were kids. Why are you going to care when I'm damn near 40 years old?
Yeah.
But now it seems like people are, and there's people that have struggled with this their whole life, and why not talk about it, get out there, and it's not to say like I was weak or I'm weak and I can't handle it or get through it. Like I said, laughing about it is always the best way to get through it. Just remember, these people are just idiots, and their fate is way worse than yours because they got to live with themselves every day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's true. Like I said, you get the word out there for potential parents who might want to send their kids to these homes. They'll watch these podcasts and go, "Whoa, wait a minute," because the websites are not going to have a little link on the bottom that says survivors that were abused. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You got to find that out for yourself. And with the internet as big as it is, there's no excuse for not being informed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, any parents out there, if you care about your kid and you're not just trying to like pawn them off on somebody else to beat some sense into them, kids are like dogs. You can't force all this stuff on them. You get your short-term results, but you're doing long-term harm by forcing it, beating this stuff into them. Talk to people who've been there, especially recently. Talk to the kids, not a staff member, who went there. And do your research. And if there's no way for you to regularly check up on your kid, don't send your kid there.
Right.
If you can't call your kid once by every 15 minutes and they're listening to the conversation and they're reading the letters, why? You know what I mean?
That's a red flag right there.
Why are they hiding what they're doing? Yeah. But also parents, try to think you're going to be responsible too. You know what I mean? Think about that. You should be held responsible too for what happens to your kid if you put them into the trust of someone else. You know what I mean? Someday your kid's going to be the one that's going to decide whether you're going to a nursing home or not. Just remember that. For real.
True. That's true.
Yeah. All right.
All right, Preston. Hey, hang on the line for a few minutes. I want to talk to you real quick. Let me go ahead and end the podcast, all right?
All right, man.
So, everybody watching, I want to thank you for watching the podcast today. I want to thank Preston for being here. And by the way, Preston, thank you for your service. It's really appreciated.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yep.
I appreciate it.
So, for the Hammer Podcast, I'm Jason. You take care of yourself, and you take care of each other.